On a cold winter night in 1898, Saint Charbel Makhlouf was laid to rest in the quiet monastery hills of Annaya, Lebanon. What followed was not grief alone, but an unexpected stillness that felt charged, as if heaven had not fully withdrawn. Saint Charbel Makhlouf had lived as a hermit of silence and prayer, scarcely known beyond his monastic walls. Yet within days of burial, monks noticed a faint glow seeping from the grave, something no lamp or candle could reasonably explain. By the following evenings, villagers walking the valley paths paused in fear and wonder. A steady light hovered above the monastery grounds, bright enough to guide footsteps, yet soft enough to feel deliberate, as though inviting witnesses rather than alarming them. Elders later recalled how families gathered after evening prayers, some clutching rosaries, others simply watching in silence. No voice commanded them to come, yet night after night they returned, drawn by a radiance that refused to behave like ordinary fire. The light did not flicker or fade with weather or wind. It remained constant, observed for nearly 40 nights, as word spread across nearby villages. People spoke quietly, uncertain whether they were seeing mercy, warning, or something not yet meant to be understood. Monks at Annaya examined the grave repeatedly, suspecting trickery or reflection. They found none. The soil was undisturbed, the tomb unaltered. What troubled them most was not the light itself, but the calm authority it seemed to carry without explanation or demand. News traveled along pilgrimage routes and market roads, carried by travelers who had no reason to exaggerate. Many had seen nothing like it before. The glow neither consumed nor warmed, lingering instead like a sign patiently waiting to be read. For those who knew his life, the silence felt familiar. Charbel had spent decades in hidden obedience, fasting, confessing, and praying through the night. Now, even in death, attention gathered around him without noise, as though humility itself had learned to shine. The dates were carefully noted by clergy, not proclaimed from pulpits. This was not spectacle. It unfolded during ordinary days of work and prayer, while bells rang and candles burned as always, making the phenomenon harder to dismiss and more difficult to explain away. After 40 days, the light ceased as quietly as it began. No announcement marked its end. What remained was a question shared by all who watched from the valley below. Why would such a sign appear only after a life had already ended? When church authorities finally opened the grave, they expected decay, not disturbance. Instead, witnesses stood still as the body appeared intact, supple, and strangely warm. No incense masked the moment, and no ritual prepared them for what they were about to confront. Saint Charbel's body showed no sign of preservation techniques known at the time. Yet a clear fluid seeped gently from the skin, saturating cloth and wood. Monks recorded the details carefully, aware that exaggeration would only weaken the truth they were struggling to accept. The monastery became a place of quiet procession. Farmers arrived after Sunday Mass, mothers after confession, travelers after long walks through the hills. No banners welcomed them. They came because something wordless compelled them to see, to stand, and to return changed. Clergy debated cautiously behind closed doors. Some urged restraint, others documentation. The church had seen fervor mislead before. Still, the consistency of accounts, the absence of profit, and the humility surrounding the events resisted simple dismissal, pressing for patience rather than proclamation. Those who remembered his life recalled long nights of prayer, breadless fasts, and obedience without recognition. He had once been questioned for withdrawing too deeply from the world. Now, paradoxically, the world approached him only after he could no longer answer. Medical observers were quietly invited, not to judge holiness, but to examine facts. They noted the absence of odor, the unusual temperature, the steady flow of fluid. Their notes contained no conclusions, only questions that deepened with each careful measurement. Letters began circulating beyond Lebanon, written by priests and lay witnesses alike. They described what eyes had seen, avoiding interpretation. These testimonies traveled farther than any sermon, carried by trust rather than excitement, slowly forming a wider circle of attention. Pilgrims arrived exhausted but composed, kneeling without instruction. Some whispered intentions learned in childhood, others remained silent. No promise of healing was announced, yet many sensed that the cost of witnessing this sign would not be comfort, but interior reckoning. Church records expanded, slow and deliberate. Dates, names, conditions, and distances were logged. This caution frustrated some, reassured others. Faith here was not hurried. It moved at a pace meant to protect truth, even if certainty had to wait. As weeks passed, the phenomenon refused to conclude neatly. The body remained, the reports multiplied, and explanations stalled. Observers sensed that what had begun as light after death was becoming something heavier, something that would demand response rather than admiration. Years later, church investigators returned to the events with distance and restraint. What had once felt overwhelming was now weighed slowly, testimony beside testimony. The question was no longer whether light appeared, but what kind of life could leave such a trace behind. Saint Charbel's past was revisited without sentimentality. His years of withdrawal, obedience, and physical hardship were not romanticized. Investigators noted how discipline preceded wonder, how silence shaped endurance, and how nothing in his life suggested a desire for attention after death. The monastery at Annaya gradually became a place of discernment rather than spectacle. Pilgrims arrived still, prayed briefly, and departed, changed in ways difficult to articulate. No dramatic gestures followed, only a quiet sense that conscience had been stirred and could not be ignored. Medical reports, spiritual testimonies, and monastic records were preserved together. None claimed proof beyond doubt. Instead, they pointed toward coherence. Different observers, separated by background and intent, described the same restraint, the same absence of manipulation, the same unresolved weight of meaning. Eventually, recognition followed, not as a reward, but as acknowledgement. The Church affirmed that what unfolded after 1898 did not contradict faith, reason, or tradition. Yet even this affirmation felt secondary to the deeper question pressing upon those who had witnessed quietly. Devotion to Saint Charbel spread slowly, especially among ordinary believers shaped by routine prayer. Many encountered his story through letters, parish conversations, or long journeys. The appeal was not drama, but the unsettling idea that holiness could remain hidden, then speak after silence. Those who reflected deeply noticed something demanding rather than comforting. The light did not excuse weakness, it exposed it. It suggested that a life of unseen fidelity might carry consequences extending beyond breath, memory, and even the boundaries of physical death. In time, the valley returned to ordinary nights. Lamps replaced watchers, routines replaced gatherings. Yet among those who had stood there, an inner reference point remained, as if something once witnessed continued quietly asking for alignment rather than explanation. The story endured not because it resolved questions, but because it created them. It left believers measuring their own hidden disciplines against a man who never preached loudly, yet seemed to teach most clearly only after his voice had fallen silent. What began as light over a grave matured into a mirror for the living. Saint Charbel's death did not conclude his witness, it sharpened it. And for many, the unanswered question remained unsettlingly simple. What would remain visible after their own silence?